Hello, my dear friends. A few days ago, Klal Yisrael suffered an enormous loss with the passing of Rabbi Hauer ztl on the night of Shmini Atzeres. Rabbi Hauer was a tremendous leader of the Jewish people. He served as a rabbi in Baltimore for 26 years in a very prominent shul, and then he came to the OU 5 years ago, where he was one of the senior executive directors, together with his dear friend Yibadol Chaim, Rabbi Josh Jacobs. And Rabbi Hauer's passing left thousands in a state of shock and disbelief. He was a very well-known personality. He interacted with people throughout the spectrum of society, in the Jewish world and in the secular world. He was involved with politicians. He testified in Congress. He flew back and forth to Israel many times. He was close with many politicians and the leadership of the Jewish community. And nobody would have imagined that he was 60 years old. He appeared to be in good health. He was full of strength and vitality and excitement and exuberance and enthusiasm and islavos. Nobody would have imagined, nobody could have imagined that suddenly his life would come to an end the night of Shmini Atzeres. In the Chumash, there's a phrase, Pesach Pisom. When a person becomes a Nazir, they're not allowed to come in contact with a corpse. So the Torah says if somebody dies suddenly, Pesach Pisom, the Rashi says Pesach Pisom. Each word, Pesach and Pisom, they both mean essentially the same thing. It means suddenly. So why is it repeated? So the answer is because it to emphasize that it was completely unexpected. Rabbi Hauer's passing was mamish Pesach Pisom. It was out of the clear blue. Nobody would have dreamt that Rabbi Hauer, in the prime of his career, would all of a sudden be taken away from his family, from the community, and from Klal Yisrael. It was an enormous tragedy that he passed away b'Pesach Pisom. There are many aspedim that have been delivered already about Rabbi Hauer, and I'm sure they will continue for days and days to come and months to come. Rabbi Hauer was a Manig Yisrael extraordinaire par excellence. He possessed an extraordinary sense of achrayus, of responsibility for the tzibur, for Klal Yisrael, and he devoted his entire being to serving the needs of Klal Yisrael. In any conversation, I used to see him sometimes in the halls of the OU. I was there for 3 years until I retired with Rabbi Hauer. You could feel the enormity of the weight of Klal Yisrael on his shoulders, and he was in the OU in a difficult period of time during COVID and during the October 7th tragedy, and then the hostages and the war, and you could see the weight and the burden of Klal Yisrael on his shoulders, but he carried it with tremendous strength and conviction. He was a gifted and eloquent orator. He knew what to say. He knew how to represent the needs of Klal Yisrael. He was a fantastic writer. He was a brilliant Talmid Chacham, a true Ben Torah, and his judgment was incisive, his insight was keen, and his guidance was constantly sound. I want to highlight one point about Rabbi Hauer that should be a schus in his memory, and something that we should emulate, and that is Rabbi Hauer knew what he was driven by a deep sense of mission and purpose in his life. There's a word in Chumash, in Tanakh, matara. When David was running from Shaul, who wanted to murder David, and Jonathan wanted to alert David. Jonathan was Shaul's son. And he was David's close friend. He wanted to alert him of the danger. So he shot an arrow, El HaMatara, and to the target. And they had made up beforehand to know if it was beyond the target. Before, it was a symbol of whether there was danger. A matara is a target. When you shoot an arrow, you don't just shoot it up into the air someplace. You shoot it at a target. And when a person is driving a car, if you want to go someplace, you have to have a matara. If you're using a GPS, which now everybody uses, nobody even knows where the roads are, or nobody knows how to read maps anymore. You put it into the GPS, but let's say you put in nonsense into the GPS, or you don't put in anything. The destination is blank. You'll end up no place. You have to have a matara. So life is one long journey, and a person has to have a matara. That means you have to have a goal, you have to have a target, you have to have a purpose, you have to have a tafkid. You have to have something, the value that you want to accomplish. How do you know what your matara is? Intuitively, we know where our strengths are, and we have to use those strengths to the fullest extent. And Rabbi Hauer, he understood his matara, and that's why he excelled beyond any expectation. He outdid himself. It's true, he was enormously talented, but he used them with such unbelievable dedication because he was driven by a deep and powerful sense, profound sense of mission and purpose in his life. And that's something that we all have to emulate, that we have to find our matara, because otherwise we're wasting our lives. I oftentimes see people who are retired. They don't know what to do with themselves. They tell me that they're climbing the walls. They're so bored. Their days are empty. That's such a tragedy. If a person's alive, there's so much that could still be accomplished. That's the famous story of Rabbi Salanta, that he was walking late at night and he saw somebody in a shop still working. And he asked him, "Why are you working so late?" And he said, "You see this candle? There's still oil in the candle. As long as there's oil in the candle, there's work to be done." And Rabbi Salanta was so inspired. He went home and he reviewed that phrase over and over again. As long as there's oil in the candle, and the soul and the neshama is compared to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, and the neshama is compared to a candle. As long as there's energy in the soul, there's work to be done. There's so much to be accomplished. There's so much contribution that a person can make. But a person has to know the matara. God gave everybody a matara. God didn't just take a bunch of people and drop them around, sprinkle like ants, sprinkle people around the world so the world should be populated. Every person is put here for a reason. And that's the most important question that a person has to ask themselves. What is my matara? Why am I here? What is my purpose? I told the story many times. I went to visit my father. My father had advanced Parkinson's and dementia. I went to visit him a few months before he passed away. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know that he was previously married. The dementia was horrific. And I walked into the room and my father said, he whispered and he said, I couldn't hear what he said. I said, "Daddy, what are you saying?" He said, "I'm looking for a tachlus." I couldn't believe it. My father, he didn't know where he was. His mind, his neshama was still there, but his mind was shattered by the illness. But it was so deeply ingrained in him that you have to have a tachlus in life. A matara, that he said, "I'm searching for," he didn't know where he is, but he's searching for a matara. And every person has to have a matara in life. And Rabbi Hauer serves as a tremendous inspiration that what a person can accomplish if he has a matara. Not everybody is as talented as Rabbi Hauer, but everybody has their own strengths and abilities. And as long as a person uses them to the fullest extent, then a person has fulfilled their matara. In the Parsha of Noach that we're going to read soon, this Shabbos, Noach's a mystery. Noach was a great person. Noach ish tzaddik tamim hayu b'derosiv. It says in the beginning of the Parsha, God describes Noach as a pure tzaddik. Es Elokim is halach Noach. Noach walked with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What greater accolade could there be than to say that? And for 120 years, Noach fought against all of society where they were evil, they were the immoral. And Noach stood a lone voice in the wilderness, fighting against all the degradation of society, the decay of society. So, but what happened after the Mabul? This soon after 20 years of building the Teva and standing for truth, what happened? He leaves the Teva, and then the Chumash says, Vayachal Noach ish adama. Noach, Rashi says, Vayachal means atzmachulin. He made himself profane. He debased himself. And he became an ish adama. He became a farmer. The great Noach, the great tzaddik, the great warrior. He became a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Vayish min hayayin, he drank the wine. Vayishkar, and he became drunk. Vayiskal b'sochol, and he uncovered himself in his tent. That's what happened to Noach, and his children saw that, and it was horrific. How did that happen? What happened to Noach? So I think that what happened was that as long as Noach was fighting against all of society. He was inspired. He recognized, I'm the only one that could stand up to what's happening in the world. I'm the only one that could promote the morality and ethics and values and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he's the creator of the universe. I'm the only one that could do it. That was his matara. But as soon as the Mabul was over, Noach thought, there's nothing left for me to do. Now I'm retired. and as a result, Vayochel, he also atzmo chulin, he debased himself. And what he failed to, it's not for me to criticize Noach, he was an ish tzaddik. But the Chumash says that he did that. And what he failed to recognize is that now there was an even greater task, because now that all of society, all the evil was wiped away, now there's starting new. He had the ability to put society on the right derech, on the right track, but he failed to do that because he was Vayachal Noach. He made himself chulin, and people, unfortunately, in life, so often they debase themselves. Vayachal, they don't accomplish what they're able to do. They don't accomplish what they're able to achieve because they don't appreciate that if God put me on this world, there's a mission for me, and every person has to ask themselves, what am I here for? How does a person know what their mission is? Intuitively, we can figure it out. Well, you know what our talents are. Use those talents to the best of our ability, and then that way we're fulfilling our mission. I want to read to you an article that Rabbi Hauer wrote. It's just incredible. It's mind-boggling. He wrote this article a week before he passed away. I heard Rabbi Jacobs online reading this article when he spoke about Rabbi Hauer and he eulogized him. It's incredible that Rabbi Hauer wrote this article. Listen, it's like he was writing his own epitaph. The article is entitled "Unfinished Business," and Rabbi Hauer says as follows. He says, in the davening on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur and in the Sana Tokef, we say, Mi yechya, mi yamos. Mi bekitzu, mi below bekitzu. Who will live and who will die? Who will die at the predestined time and who will die before that time? This is what Rabbi Hauer is writing. He didn't know that this was going to happen. Maybe intuitively his neshama understood. But he's writing these words. So he says, these words remind us of our vulnerability and the possibility that one may leave this world with unfinished business. At any time a person could leave. Indeed, that's what happened. Yet this Shabbos Shuvah, we read how Moshe lived 120 years to the day, indicating that God completes the years of the righteous, as Rashi says, that the righteous live out their full life, so they could accomplish the whole year, 120 complete years, so they could accomplish their mission. So Rabbi Hauer asks, this is striking, is there anyone whose business may be considered unfinished as much as Moshe? Moshe arrived in Egypt to redeem the Jewish people and bring them to the land of Israel, to bring about the fulfillment of the promise of ages that Eretz Yisrael would be our home. But Moshe did not make it there. So we know that Moshe pleaded with God to be able to bring us, but he was to no avail. So could we really say that Moshe reached his goals when his life was cut short? So Rabbi Hauer answers, it says in Pirkei Avos, Lo alecha melacha ligmor. It's not your responsibility to finish the job, nor may you be neglected. Moshe may have had an unfulfilled dream for himself and Klal Yisrael, but he continued to work until his last day towards its fulfillment. Even on that last day, Moshe continued to progress towards that goal. As once he recognized that he would not finish the job himself, he made sure to identify and hand off the Jewish people to the next leader, to pass the baton to Yeshua, who would indeed bring us to Eretz Yisrael. And this is the true meaning of a complete life. Not one that reaches its every goal, but one that continues the march towards that goal. Each one of us is part of Netzach Yisrael, the eternal Jewish people. And there is a continuum to our story. Our job is not to complete the process of redemption ourselves, but to do our part within that continuum ambitiously and with determination to move ourselves and those around us closer to it. Rabbi Hauer is describing his life. Who would have known? But he lived. His business was unfinished in terms of the continuum of Klal Yisrael, but it was complete in terms of what he had to accomplish. And when Rabbi Jacobs read this, he pointed out something that just startling. Rabbi Hauer talks about how Moshe passed on the baton to Yehoshua, and he appointed him to take his place to be the leader of Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Hauer's first name is Moshe, and Rabbi Jacobs, who was Rabbi Hauer's super close friend and partner, and he was deeply, profoundly influenced by Rabbi Hauer. What's Josh Jacobs' Hebrew name, Yehoshua. So Rabbi Hauer was preparing, maybe unbeknownst to himself, but he was preparing Rabbi Yeshua to pass the baton onto Yeshua. The whole article is mamish prophetic, and the point is so profound that a person never knows when their end is going to take. Look at Rabbi Hauer. None of us, in a million years, you would have said, who do you think maybe will pass away this year? It wouldn't have been Rabbi Hauer. It was shocking, but that's how life is. A person never knows how much time they have left. And I once heard Rabbi Wein, who also just passed away recently. He once was speaking to a group of rabbis, and he said, he was terrific in things that happened of finding lessons. He said he was parking in a parking lot, and the attendant said, "How long are you going to be, Rabbi?" And he says, "That's a great question. Nobody asked that me before. I hope it'll be 120 years." We don't ask ourselves that question, how long am I going to be? And if we do, the answer is nobody knows. So don't waste time. Time is the most precious thing that we have, and there's tremendous things that we can accomplish. So let's follow the model of Rabbi Hauer, who felt the tremendous sense of achrayus. We all need to feel an achrayus for Klal Yisrael. Doesn't matter who we are and what our talents are. Each one of us has a tachlis, for sure. And we have to ask ourselves, why did God put me in this world? What am I doing here? Why am I here? And if we don't ask that question, and instead we just wander around aimlessly, then we're going to accomplish nothing. But if we follow the example of Rabbi Hauer and all great people, Klal Yisrael, all the Gedolei Yisrael, then Amir Hashem will be able to accomplish great things for ourselves, for our family, for our community, and for all of Klal Yisrael. Thank you for listening, and have a good Shabbos.